Regular subscribers, I'm still alive. I'm not making videos as often as I used to, but I still am around, and I'm going to be making mainly math videos, but this one's going to be on the philosophy of science. And I'm going to attempt to address critically the claim that extraordinary claim, and this is a claim made in skeptic circles, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Now that seems very logical on the surface. In particular, I'm referring to one of the SETI debates that you can find on YouTube, where you have SETI scientists debating with rare earthers, and the rare earthers claim that the probability of life on other planets is so small we could rule it out. Okay, one of the rare earthers made the claim that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Therefore, to call the existence of alien life a theory just wouldn't hold up, because it's such an extraordinary claim that it requires extraordinary evidence, and thus we can rule it out. That was their claim. This individual was very much tied into the skeptic philosophy, the kind of James Randi, uber, I don't even want to call it scientific, because it's more of a kind of uber rationalism. And I would say that this individual believes that, like a lot of them do, that it is their mission to attack anything that would be considered quote-unquote pseudoscience. Now, there is a lot of pseudoscience out there. There's reptilians abducted me. There's, God spoke to me and told me to form a cult. There's Comet Elenin. There's even one of the usual turkeys on YouTube who claims that because he saw the moon during the daytime traveling with the sun, that means we're in a dimensional shift. Well, yeah, he saw the moon in the daytime, and then he claims that the moon rises in the west. No, it doesn't. It rises in the east due to the rotation of the Earth. But also, more importantly, that because the moon rose later in the day, well, that was a big crisis for this individual, when it was probably very late in the lunar cycle, where the moon is going to rise later in the day due to the rotation of due to the orbit, rather, of the moon around the Earth. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of pseudoscience out there, and I appreciate the efforts of those who try to advance an ideology of skepticism when it comes to claims that could potentially be very dangerous to democracy. I mean, you could have a cult leader arising, God forbid, a Jim Jones type, okay? And that's definitely possible. The problem is when rationalism itself becomes unscientific. When the bar of evidence is raised so high that instead of it being a spur to scientific discovery, it becomes a dissuader. Because if you really look at the history of science, it is not necessarily the case that extraordinary claims require quote-unquote extraordinary evidence. For one thing, what is an extraordinary claim? The term extraordinary is opinion, not fact. The term extraordinary is not itself necessarily a scientific term. Now, you can advance some kind of statistical argument that something is highly unlikely. That's a different thing. But the term extraordinary is not a statistical argument. It's an opinion. It's an impression. If I say, if you had gone back into the history of science, let's say you had said to Charles Darwin, evolution is such an extraordinary claim that it requires such extraordinary evidence, don't bother going on the Beagle. And of course he would say, well, you claim to be a time traveler from the future, that's an extraordinary claim. Oh, well, you get the point, okay? In other words, Charles Darwin didn't say, well, that's an extraordinary claim. He went out and he attempted to find evidence. The same with Albert Einstein, okay? The idea of Lorentz shifting and both special relativity and general relativity are extraordinary claims. If you really think about it, these are extraordinary claims. And they were proven not necessarily with extraordinary evidence. I mean, Sir Arthur Eddington, once he noted the bending of light during the famous eclipse with his telescope, basically a telescope, not really much beyond the astronomical tech equipment that they had at the time. The world scientific community accepted his evidence, and relativity was considered proven. Not only was relativity considered proven, but even more extraordinary claims in quantum theory came along. So extraordinary, by the way, that Einstein stepped back and had difficulty accepting it. And yet, it was never the case that the bar of evidence for the existence of subatomic particles of a strange nature, where that obeyed the strange laws of quantum physics, the bar of evidence for that was not so high that it operated as a dissuader. The scientific community could have said of Albert Einstein, you know, this is so strange what you're saying, that we're not going to bother finding evidence for it. And any evidence we find for it, we're going to dismiss as the ravings of a crackpot, which they could have done with Sir Arthur Eddington. You know, he was politically unpopular due to his pacifism during World War I. That could have been used against him. It wasn't. Okay. Albert Einstein's own pacifism and radicalism could have been used against him, but it wasn't. In many other cases, I mean, even in the case of Copernicus and Galileo, you might say that the Earth moving is an extraordinary claim, and yet it was accepted by the scientific community, not by the religious community, of course, but the scientific community with a certain equanimity, you know, that's now proven. And there are plenty of examples in the realm of science of extraordinary claims, but extraordinary in terms of their impression upon us. Okay, not extraordinary in some categorical sense that we can say that they're extraordinary, because the term extraordinary has no meaning scientifically. They're just claims that require evidence. Now, it may be, you might say that maybe what's provided to prove an extraordinary theory is evidence that you could call extraordinary. You could label it extraordinary. But it's not so extraordinary as to act as a dissuader. Science is about pursuing extraordinary claims. And that's what I think SETI does. It pursues extraordinary claims and attempts to find evidence. Now, I'm going to leave the UFO issue aside here. I'm not going to touch it on this video. I would say that, again, I do appreciate the efforts of debunking pseudoscience, but I don't believe that rationalism should be elevated above science itself. Science is about an open mind, yes, skepticism, but an open-minded skepticism. And I don't believe that one's philosophical view is pro or against religion or pro or against the paranormal or pro against anything should be elevated above the observation that should be the basis of science, the empirical observation that goes even beyond theory. Now, I am a SETI supporter. I want to say that from the outset. I will agree with the rare earthers. Well, I want to give them a fair shot here, but I do agree with them that we should be skeptical about specific claims. For instance, if there is a specific claim that such and such a star system has a planet with life, that should be that should not be accepted at face value. The default assumption should be that whatever phenomenon is being observed is inorganic, and that those who claim that it is life should have a bar of evidence. But that bar of evidence should not be so high as to preclude any possible research. And I would also state that to finish this issue and to move on from here, I would say that you have to distinguish between the universal and the particular. The universal is that the entire universe has life or doesn't have life. That is a different issue than a particular claim. To say that we can rule out life in the entire universe because we haven't yet detected life confuses the universal and the particular. In the realm of the particular, we always exercise great skepticism, because that is the way that the scientific method advances. If I say such and such a phenomenon is life in outer space, you are right to advance a skeptical, to a counterclaim that's a skeptical counterclaim. But you cannot generalize from that the question of whether there is life in the entire universe itself, which is huge and massive. Actually, to be honest with you, in my personal opinion, the claim that the universe is devoid of life is actually the more extraordinary claim. But that's opinion. Let's get the facts. Thank you.